Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I am chairing today's panel. Joining me on the panel via Zoom are Mr. Ron Merritt and Ms. Valerie Werkun. Our assessor today is Mr. Kem Wong, and our administrative personnel is Ms. Phoebe Graywood. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 8 on our docket today. Ms. Graywood, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Mr. Wong, please state your full name.
Kem Wong.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, please stand. Please state your full name. Erin Cates. Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, Ms. Cates and Mr. Wong. Before we begin, are there any preliminary issues that need to be discussed?
No.
No, okay. All right, then, Mr. Wong. We'll start with you, file number 24-2969 12 Harvlong Avenue. When you're ready, please.
Okay. The subject property is 12 Harvlong Avenue. The file number is 24-2969. The roll number is 072-180-110-00. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is $5,773,000. This is a commercial row house that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1971 and has 44 units with 44 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. It's close to the west perimeter near Portage. On page 4 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $1,277 to get a potential income of $674,000. We used a 2.6% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $657,000. And we used a 54% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $300,000. Capped at 5.2%, we have an estimated market value of $5 $5,773,000. On page 5 are some rent comparables, showing that the rents that we've used are in line with what's in the market or a little bit below market. On page 6 is some market rent information. The subject property is owned by Manitoba Housing, so it is affordable housing, and the income and expenses for the property are, I don't feel they're representative of market. So looking to some market information from CMHC, you can see that the market rents for row house from CMHC, the market rents do work out to about 867,000, and whereas compared to the subject property for the model has applied 674,000. So the model has looked at this as if the property was a below average apartment building, and the model rent at 674,000 is supported by the CMHC rent, which is 867,000, and which is about 28% higher than what the model has assigned for this property. In the middle of page 6 are some expense comparables. You can see that the expenses, they're around the 48-49% and range, and the expense comparables support the model expense ratio at 54.3%. And at the bottom of page 6 are some sales comparables that range from about 120,000 per unit to about 210,000 per unit. This supports the assessed value per unit at about 131,000 per unit. On page 7 are some pictures of the comparable properties, the sales comparables. On page 8 is information on how we derived our cap rates. And on page 9 are some cap rate sales. So these cap rates, they were derived by stabilizing the owner's reported income and expenses through 3 years stabilization. And the stabilized net operating income was applied against the sale price to arrive at the cap rates in the chart. On page 11 is the chart for CMHC market rents for row houses. On page 12 is a permit that was taken out in 2011 for some alterations. On page 13 is some information on the subject property. You can see that, I guess just reading a little bit from the description, from the information, says this Manitoba housing project consists of extensive revitalization and renovation work to the exterior of the Lake Ridge Townhouse Complex. This renovation and revitalization is part of Manitoba Housing's CEAP funding projects. The intent of the project is to decrease energy costs, increase occupant comfort levels, extend the life of the building envelope, and provide a maintenance reduced exterior finish. So it just gives you a little bit of information on some of the work that was done to the property. So once again, the renovations were intended to decrease the energy, increase the comfort, and extend the life of the property. The properties is owned by Manitoba Housing, and we have looked at this as if it was a below average apartment building, and the model has applied below average market rents, and the rents that have been applied by the model are supported by the market rents from CMHC and from the market. The model expenses are also a little bit higher than what market expenses might be. And so the expenses are also supported by the market, and the model cap rate is supported by market sales as well. So I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $5,773,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, do you have questions for the assessor?
I have some questions. I also have some rebuttal.
Okay, we'll go through the questions, we'll go through your main evidence, and then we'll go to rebuttal.
Okay, sounds good. So on your page 4, your income value summary, so just to clarify, is the model accounting for the fact that the property is social housing, or it's treating it as a market apartment that operates on the lower end of the rental range?
Yeah, it's treating it as if it was in a market apartment at the lower end of the range.
Okay. On page 6, toward the bottom, your sale comparables. So are all of these sales land title sales, or are any of them share sales?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that they transacted through land titles.
Okay. And are all of the properties market housing, or any of them social housing properties?
They are market sales, market housing.
And so if they're market housing, then they would have been purchased for the income stream the purchaser could expect to get. Would that be correct?
Potentially.
Potentially?
I can't say for sure.
Okay. So if the subject property has no history of economic profit, there would be uncertainty as to what someone could achieve from the subject property. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I would say that there would be uncertainty. At the same time, maybe a purchaser would probably use their experience in a similar type of property to try to estimate what type of income that it might generate. So there would be uncertainty, but there would be some market information to indicate what they might be able to achieve with the property.
Even though the property is a multi-building social housing property, that we don't really see properties like this in the market.
Well, it's a rental property, so I believe somebody would look at it and potentially see what type of rental potential that it could get from it.
Okay. Are you aware that Comp 3 on Renfrew Bay and River Heights was featured in the Winnipeg Architecture Foundation as an example of modern architecture? And in your opinion, would that be comparable to the subject?
I'm not sure about the article, but when you look at the property, it does seem pretty. It doesn't seem like there's anything super special about it. But at the same time, it also does appear to be at the higher end of the range.
Okay. So in looking at the suite count, these properties would be quite small compared to the subject property. Would that be fair to say?
Suite count wise, yes.
And had you considered economies of scale in that more units may lead to a lower price per unit?
That could be the case, but I felt that these were the reasonable comparables, and I'm not really too sure if there are any other sales comparables with, say, 44 units or 50 units like the subject property are available for us to utilize as a comparison.
Okay. So when dealing with the cap rate sales, is it correct that the city typically argues that smaller properties equal a larger pool of buyers, which would drive the prices up?
That could be the case. That's just what we've seen in terms of sales.
But to clarify, that is a position your department advocates for, correct?
I'm not sure if it's a position, it's just what the information suggests.
So following that logic, if the information suggesting that, then would these sale prices not be inflated given the size of the properties, and therefore they wouldn't really be good comparables to the subject?
Well, they might not be the most perfect comparables, but they are the best comparables that we have. If there were other comparables that might suggest a lower value, we would be happy to look at it if you were able to present such sales.
Okay, and wouldn't it be fair to say that's why we don't do direct comparison for income producing properties, because there is a lack of sales?
Well, I think you can use the sales that you have to try to reconcile your estimates of value, just to make sure that your estimates of value are reasonable, which is, I think, what we've done.
Okay. Moving on to page 8, your cap rate table. So with your cap rate ranges, can you provide any information on the sales that are being used to achieve those ranges, such as the number of sales or the location of those properties?
No, I cannot.
And the 20th and 80th percentiles are shown, but would it be fair to say that a riskier property would have a cap rate beyond the 80th percentile?
It could also be in the lowest percentile as well.
But is the cap rate not measuring the risk, at least in part?
Yes, sometimes in part. But there have been some, I would say, potentially, quote unquote, riskier properties that do exchange for lower cap rates.
Riskier how?
In terms of there being some upside potential.
Well, if there's upside potential, that would lower the risk, would it not? Because then there's potential for them to get a different income stream.
From what I've seen and in some appraisal reports, that if there is potential to increase the rents, they could potentially sell for a lower cap rate.
And then going to your cap rate evidence on page 9. So the purpose stated for providing the cap rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so out of your 12 cap rates, only 4 are falling within the 20th to 80th percentile. Would you agree with that? Where most of the cap rates are stated to fall?
If that's the number that you came up with, I probably wouldn't disagree with that.
Okay, and have you provided your workups as part of your direct evidence?
We have not, but what I can say is that it is stabilized over using 3 years information to establish the NOI, and that NOI is applied against the sale price to arrive at those cap rates on the chart.
Okay, and then in terms of page 12, your permits. So at the time of the permits, the property was already 40 years old and it's wood frame construction. Is that correct?
If that's the number that you came up with, I would probably not disagree with that.
So then based on that, does it seem atypical that they would have to invest around $36,000 a unit to keep the property functional, given that it's a property that requires a lot of maintenance?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
The question is, does it really seem atypical that they would need to invest that type of capital into the property to keep it functional and keep it going?
I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. That would conclude my questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Merritt, do you have questions for the assessor?
Yes, Mr. Wong, the properties that we have on the docket today are all Manitoba housing, correct?
I think a lot, at most, if not all.
Yeah. So I just have a few things. Manitoba housing is owned, it's the government. Have any of these properties ever been sold? Any type of these properties ever been sold?
As far as I can tell, some of them have, yes.
Okay. Rent is established how on these Manitoba housing units? How is rent established?
I believe,
ability to pay, or based on their income?
yeah, I believe some of them, or maybe a lot of them are rent geared towards income.
So in order to qualify, they have to have a lower income, and thus the rent is a little lower than market. Is this correct?
Probably a lot lower than market.
Okay. And as you had said, the subject property is, you classified as below market.
I would say a
I
below
mean,
average. We
below,
value,
below average, I'm sorry.
yeah, below average apartment building. I
So,
believe would be a fair way to, yeah,
okay.
value
So
it.
the property, so you're using a cap rate, which is pretty low of 5.2. So, you feel as if that is justified with a below average property?
I believe it is. It, like, I think we've recognized that it is we've treated it as if it was a below average apartment building by utilizing rents that are below the market. And in this particular case, it's actually 28%, say, below what CMHC says is the market. That's a decent chunk, right? And the expenses that we've applied are about 54%, whereas maybe market expenses might be about 50%. So we've utilized probably higher than average expenses to recognize the fact that it is a sort of below average apartment building. And and the 5.2% cap rate is probably more just a normal cap rate. But if we were to sort of recognize the affordability nature of this property in the cap rate, say it was 5.8% instead of 5.2, then I think that would be reasonable if you were to use the actual market expenses or market income and expenses to try to recognize the affordableness of the property. But I feel to recognize the affordableness of the property through lower rents, higher expenses, and a higher cap rate, I feel that might be kind of overcompensating for the affordableness of nature of this property.
Yeah, but like you say, it's everything is subject to various variations. But your defense is strictly model driven, correct?
Yes, it would be, I guess, recognizing the affordableness of the property in the income and the expenses, but using a more a market cap rate.
All right. I thank you, Mr. Wong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Werhun, do you have any questions?
The majority were answered, but just to ask the assessor, have you inspected any of these properties?
I have not inspected this property. I don't believe I've inspected any of the properties on the docket.
Okay, and the comparables also, right?
I have not inspected the comparable properties, no.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, Mr. Wong, on your page 11. You provided private road townhouse average rents by zone. What zone is this one in? Sorry.
It would be I believe it. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it would be St. James, and I should have put it in my page 6, but because the St. James, you can see in the chart on page 11 that the St. James, it doesn't have any estimates of rural housing rents for the St. James area. So I ended up using the zones 5 to 12
Okay.
to, yeah. So
You use that overall line, and I
yes,
appreciate.
yes, because I believe the subject property is in the St. James, and if you look at the St. James zone, there isn't anything stated there.
Right. Yeah. Okay, and going back to your comparables on page, where were they?
Page 7, 6, and 7.
Page 5, your rent
Oh,
comparable.
okay, sorry.
Are these all similar quality type apartments? I see that they're all row housing, but are they the same quality of row housing?
I think there might be some differences, but I can't speak to the exact quality, but I do feel that we don't have there aren't a ton of row housing properties in the city, so I can't speak to the quality of the properties, but I believe they are, I guess, average in nature.
Okay. There was questions earlier about social housing versus just below average apartments. Do you see a difference in how they're treated in your model, or do you recognize that social housing aspect, or what do you do?
Yeah, we don't really recognize the social aspect of it because the information that we have in terms of sales information is primarily market apartment buildings. So that's how we have to value all the properties, including the Manitoba housing properties. But from some appraisals that I've seen on Manitoba housing properties, they do seem to appraise them in a similar in a market manner because they probably have to, because the income and expenses from social housing properties, they might run at a near zero net operating income, and to try to value something at a zero operating income is probably not going to be accurate. And so I think even in some of the appraisals of social housing properties that I've seen, they look to the market to try to estimate the value of the property, and that's in a sense what we've done, and that's what the model has to try and do, because that's the only type of information that we have to try to value affordable housing properties.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that it is difficult, and they're funded differently and all that sort of aspect, which plays into their operating.
Yeah.
What about on the expense side? Sometimes with the like, I know you've given it a larger expense ratio, reflecting that low value property. But what about things like deferred maintenance? Will we see in this level of expenses, is that enough to cover all of their operating expenses? Do they tend to put off things? Do they have enough money for that? Like, I'm just asking about this type of building. I'm sorry, I'm not being more eloquent, but maybe you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think say for this type of a building, if you were to look at a market building, it would probably be maintained, I would say, normally. But in the terms of affordable housing type properties, it would be maintained a little bit more based off of Manitoba housing. And I'm not too sure how much. I believe from some of the housing that I've seen, they do experience a little bit more wear and tear than your typical apartment building. But with regards to some of the deferred maintenance, there may be deferred maintenance, there may not be. But if you're looking at it from a Manitoba housing point of view, Manitoba housing does allocate money for maintaining these properties and for capital expenditures that might be required to keep the properties up and running. So you know what, I guess you can look at it that way. A normal market apartment would be the property owner taking care of the maintenance aspects of it. For an affordable housing, it would be more, I guess, the government of Manitoba allocating money for maintaining any sort of capital expenditures or maintenance or deferred maintenance is what I've seen, and it's how I understand things.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Long. Ms. Cates, when you're ready with your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you. So if you turn to page 2 of my brief, I have a summary of some of the facts of the property, along with our requested assessment of $5,003,000. On page 6, we have some maps and Google Map imagery showing the size of the parcel, as well as the approximate location. On page 7, we have some exterior photographs from street view. On page 9, we have our property description. So the subject property is located between Harvlong Avenue and Lumsden Avenue at their intersection with Lake Ridge Road in the Crestview neighborhood. The property consists of 6 distinct buildings built in the early 70s with a site size of approximately 2.4 acres. The subject has 44 units, which includes 29 3-bedrooms and 15 4-bedroom units, and there are 44 outdoor parking stalls noted. So if you turn to page 14, we have the overview of our income approach. So the property is social housing. We're not disputing the NOI, but I just want to take a few moments to go through how we're coming to the NOI and the logic behind it. So the property operates on a rent geared to income basis, meaning people pay what they can. So what might be achieved for the units could be as low as $200, $300 for a larger family unit. So in terms of the market rents, we know that the city's rents that they're using is taking a factor of CMHC. And when we consider what CMHC is, it's the average. We don't get the whole range of what those rents are for that zone. And those averages will be pulled up by newer developments, renovated properties. So it does make sense that when we're dealing with a social housing property that's going to be utility grade, not have luxurious features, that they should be toward the lower end of that range. So even taking a factor of 70%, 75% of CMHC does make sense in terms of the rents applied. Now, given that it's social housing, it's also not going to achieve a market vacancy. So for the purpose of the valuation, we've applied 2.6% based on CMHC, and that's as assessed. And for the expenses, a 54.3% of EGI expense allowance would be what I would suggest would be on the lower end of an expense allowance for a row house type property. When we see well-managed market row houses, seeing 55, 60%, or even sometimes higher than that, going toward the low 60s, mid 60s is not unusual, because we have here a property that's multiple buildings, wood frame, multiple building systems to maintain. So I would suggest 54.3 is the absolute low end and not really capturing all of that expense that would need to go into it. So for the purposes here, and to simplify the issues, we're not disputing the expense allowance, and we're going to capture everything else in the cap rate. So if you turn to page 15, it starts an overview of how we approach social housing cap rates. Now, social housing is different from market housing. I would suggest it's a distinct subset of multifamily properties, and it should be valued in a different way. So in terms of how we approach social housing properties, we start with a base market cap rate and make adjustments as required. So these adjustments can be put into 4 broad categories, which would include low cost or low quality construction, advanced age, declining neighborhood, and low income tenancy. Now, not every property would have all of those features, but every social housing property does have low income tenancy. So if you turn to page 17, we have a discussion of the effective low income tenancy, but to summarize that discussion, the link is that low income tenancy creates issues with deferred maintenance. The reason is because these properties don't earn enough revenue to cover their operating expenses. And as the assessor alluded to in his answering of questions, they'll often have zero operating income or even, operating at losses. So the point of that is that they get funding in order to cover their operation, but what's left over is that preventative maintenance that market apartments would be doing in order to prolong the life of the asset. Additionally, as issues come up, they'll often get pushed to a later date until they have funding to address those. And what happens is that not only do the number of issues build over time, but then the severity of those issues will build as building systems may have to compensate for other systems. And this is something that was illustrated with the Manitoba housing property at 185 Smith, where there was issues building up over time. And then they had massive give in the systems, broken water pipe flooded, causing damage to plumbing, elevators. And essentially, even after putting $3 million into it, it still wasn't enough to bring the tenants back. And this is a symptom of just chronic underfunding of these properties. And we could see how that issue comes to be when you see that in 2017, there was an estimated $500 million in deferred maintenance for the Manitoba housing portfolio. And when we look at current news articles and we see that only 30 million is being put toward these properties, and that's recently, and we know that there was 500 million before, it's just not enough to keep up with this stock. So that's the background for the adjustment for the low income tenancy and social housing, is that it's not enough to just say the rents are low and that's accounting for the additional risk with social housing. The rents are to do with the finishes of the unit. We know the finishes are lower. The expenses are market, the vacancy is market. We need to capture everything else in the cap rate in order to account for the fact that this is just a different type of property. So if you turn to page 19, we have an overview of the factors that we looked at for this property. So we are disputing the 5.2% cap rate. We're using a cap rate of 6%. Our base cap rate for a property of this age and type would be 5.5%. And considering that the scale of the property, that it's 6 buildings, row house, it's a large site to maintain, as well that it's social housing and all of the issues we've just discussed, 8.5% risk premium assigned to the property does make sense. So if you turn to page 21, we have our valuation, which shows how it all fits into place. The net operating income of $300,203 and our 6% cap rate. And I would suggest that the work that's been done to this property, because repairs aren't able to be done regularly, you'll often see that a capital injection will need to be put into the property. So having $1 million put in 2010 to redo some of the exteriors, that's what we would expect for a property of this age, of this type. Now, I think it would be a good idea, just in terms of the discussion of cap rates, to briefly just go through our cap rate study, just to get the sense of where the base cap rates.
Is this part of your main evidence or is this your rebuttal?
No, it's the Altus apartment cap rate study. It was a separate document, but it was submitted as part of
Your main
evidence.
Okay. Okay, proceed, yeah.
Proceed with that, okay. Okay, so just going through the cap rate study, which is the separate document. On page 2, we have an overview of cap rates. So essentially the main items of the cap rate are perceived risk, expectations for income appreciation, required on other investment vehicles. Oh, sorry, expectations for income appreciation, and then separately required return on other investment vehicles. If you turn to page 5, we have the overview of the assessor's cap rates. So while most of their cap rates are between the 4.75 to 5.45% range, we know that the entirety of the range based on the valuation manual that they have is 3.5 to 7.95%. And given that perceived risk is a one of the big parts of the cap rate, I would suggest that properties that are riskier, being that they are social housing, should be beyond the 80th percentile and toward the higher end of that range. Below that, we see the broker report summary. So what they're suggesting for low-rise properties is somewhere in the range of 5 to 6% for Colliers, 5 to 5.75 for Cushman. CBRE is a bit more optimistic, but their low-rise B, they're starting at a 5%. They're going up to 5.25, and they're just showing more compression than the other brokers. But what I would suggest here is that the compression would be for the best quality properties, which the subject is not. And additionally, if 2 out of the 3 are suggesting a top end of 5.75 or 6, and that's for investment grade properties, then if we're dealing with social housing properties, they should be either toward the higher end of that range or beyond that range, given that these properties aren't investment grade properties. Now on page 6, there's an overview on borrowing costs. The main point here is that if an investor could get a low risk government bond at a return of 4.5%, then using cap rates that are 4.5% or below that, such as in the city's evidence, just doesn't really make sense. Why would someone invest in a higher risk property, which is real estate, when they could have got a secure government bond at 4.5%? So I would suggest that those cap rates that are quite low at the below 5% range shouldn't really be relied upon as valuable evidence for valuations of real estate as of April 1, 2023. On page 9, we have some of the factors that we look at. So not every factor will apply to every property, but some that we're looking at today would be building type and construction, durability and quality of income. On page 11, we have our sale chart. So we have a range of 5.26% to 7.11%. These are stabilized based on as similar as we can to how we do our valuations. So where we have multiple years of data, we would use that. But in place of that, if we only have 1 year of data to stabilize, then that is how we've done those cap rates. And back to our kind of first page of this, if you look at how to stabilize a cap rate, it's the definition is that it could be based on 1 year of income and expense data. Now, the other thing that we've done with the cap rates is we've gone beyond just a data entry approach. We're relying on principle of anticipation as well, being that if the purchaser could reasonably expect the rents to increase, and they would have known that at the time of purchase, then we've used that better information as part of our cap rates. On page 12, we have a price per suite chart. So I would suggest that this can be a gauge of value, but given that the challenges with direct comparison for these type of income producing properties, it shouldn't be relied upon as the most accurate measure of value. And that would conclude my cap rate presentation. So just to summarize, value of $5,003,000, it works out to $113,000 a suite roughly. That's still what I would consider very reasonable for a social housing property. And then our appendix would start on page 23. And we have the city valuation and just some other materials that we use for the social housing cap rate information. That would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, do you have questions for the applicant?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt.
I have none, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay, you're fading a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Ms. Werhan, do you have questions for the applicant?
None, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. I did have questions on the social housing, but you covered that, so I appreciate that. And the deferred maintenance side, I appreciate you put that. You included that in your presentation, so thank you very much. Now I understand you do have rebuttal evidence, right? So let's turn to that then.
Okay, we're starting with mine.
So, yeah, we'll start with yours.
Okay,
Just give us a minute to open it up.
for sure.
My computer decided to freeze in the middle of them. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of our
Uh,
rebuttal.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that I bring it up.
Yes? You want to make sure you bring up the rebuttal evidence?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead, of course. Let me know when you have it ready.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes it takes a while to get to me. Sometimes they send it right when they start talking about it. But in this case, it was sent a little bit earlier, so I definitely have it. I just need to
Sure.
open it, which is better than waiting for it.
Oh, we have to wait for me now too.
Okay. I'm good to go.
Okay, but just give me a minute because I'm not connected to the internet. It's working on it. Okay. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Kate.
Okay. So if you turn to page 2, we've started with just an overview of the city's cap rates. So they're suggesting a range of 3.46% to 5.74% based on these sales. Again, I would just echo the sentiment that cap rates that are below 4.5%, 5% really shouldn't be relied upon as a gauge of value for real estate as of our April 1, 2023 reference date. If you turn to page 4, we've done some rebuttal on 459 Sargent. So I would just like to correct a comment that I made earlier on in questioning, where we were talking about properties that can change the income stream. It shouldn't have been phrased as a matter of risk, but it should have been a different opportunity. So if you're buying a property where you have the potential to get a different income stream, increase the rents, you're getting a different opportunity. It shouldn't have been phrased in regard to risk. So I apologize for that. Okay, so the first sale we have is 459 Sargent. So we've restabilized this cap rate. You'll see on page 5, we've used the expense data as provided by the city. But at the time of purchase, the property was advertised as having a rent of $740 per unit per month that they could expect to achieve, along with $40 per stall per month for parking. So based on that, the purchaser would have expected to get these levels of rents rather than the historical rent. So I would say the historical information can be a good gauge, but if you have information that something new is coming that you could reasonably expect to achieve this different rent, then properly stabilizing the cap rate would be to use that rent that you can expect to achieve rather than using that previous rent in place. Page 7, we've also done a restabilization of 150 Hendon. So the city's cap rate is in the kind of 4% range for that property. We've interviewed the purchaser and they advised that at the time of purchase, they were informed by the vendor that there had been some work done to the property and that the vendor had applied for above guideline rent increases. So they would have reasonably expected that they could achieve that higher level of rent once they took over the property. So what I've provided in this rebuttal is I've used that higher level of rent, and it shows that in 2021, so they purchased the property June 2nd. In 2021, for their I&E submission, they said that they were reasonably expecting to get a rent of $1,006 per unit per month, which would work out to a gross potential of $712,182. And then we see that in their first full year of operation in 2022, they did actually achieve a value that's quite similar to that. So their assumption, based on good information at the time of sale, materialized. And so that cap rate would be, based on that stabilized income stream, would be 5.42%. And I provided the workup on page 8. As well, I put some sample RTB orders showing the increases. So the orders came in July, but they were effective for June. And then we've also provided some rebuttal on the older cap rates for 700 St. Mary's and 32 Arden based on renovations, purchasing with the intent to renovate or renovating after purchase, showing that there was intention when purchasing, but those are older cap rates, so I won't go through those, but there's also some rebuttal if you wanted to peruse those. And that would conclude my rebuttal evidence.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cates. Mr. Wong, do you have questions on the rebuttal evidence presented by Ms. Cates?
No, maybe just a couple comments.
Okay, we're after questions right now.
Yeah. No, I don't. Okay, so I guess for your rebuttal information, you were, I guess, using projected information versus historical known information. Is that correct, as of the sale?
So for 459 Sargent, that would have been broker information. But for Hendon, I wouldn't say that's projected information. That's pretty good information they had from the vendor at the time of purchase that they could reasonably be expected to achieve.
Okay, yeah, but it wasn't based off of what was actually how the property actually performed prior to the sale.
Yeah, it strays a bit from historical performance because, as I've mentioned, the historical performance can be a good indicator, but if you have better information, then you have to use that as well because you're getting into the mind of what the purchaser might have been expecting to achieve at the time of purchase. So it has to go beyond just entry of historical information.
Okay, that would be all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. Werhan, do you have any questions on the rebuttal evidence?
I do not, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt? Oh, you're muted, Mr. Merritt. Yep, still. Just trying to find the button. Wait, I'm gonna miss that. It's on your screen. There you go.
Sorry about that.
That's
Okay.
okay.
I have no questions, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have no questions. Mr. Wong, I understand you have rebuttal evidence also?
Yes.
Okay, give us a minute. Do we have it? Thank you so much. Three item one, two out. Unless I need to read. Do you have it, Mr. Merritt?
Yes.
The assessor's rebuttal?
Yep.
Okay, I do not, so I'm trying to look for it. See.
Madam Chair, I do not have that either.
Thank you. Okay, it's there now. Ms. Werman, it's there now. should be anyway. Fine. Yeah. It's the second item, number 1. You have it.
Yes, I have it now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Wong.
Okay, I guess everything, a lot of the document is pretty much summarized on the first page.
Okay,
You can see the cap rate sales that that Altus has used in 345 Talbot, 677 Maryland, 738 St. Mary's, 100 Maryland, and 2390 McPhillips. On the bottom of page 1, it's just an indication of how they used 1 year of income and expenses, and how it is insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income. I mean, when you're trying to stabilize something, you typically you're stabilizing over a period of time. And in the cases of sales 1 to 3, Talbot, Maryland, and St. Mary's, they only used 1 year's of information. And not only that, but they also used estimated rents instead of their actual rents. So the cap rates for sales for 1 to 3 aren't really usable because nothing has been stabilized. And on sale number 4, the actual income, there was no actual income and expenses involved in the calculation of the net operating income. So I'm not sure how you can use a cap rate that is derived from purely estimated numbers. And on for sale 5, their potential gross income utilized by Altus is not based on historical data. I mean, there's very well-known historical data on the subject property, but it was not used. So it was incorrectly stabilized to estimate the cap rate for the property.
okay. And does that conclude your rebuttal evidence?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cates, do you have questions?
Yeah, just a couple, thank you. So in regards to the comment on sale 1 to 3 being unusable, is the idea behind 1 year of income and expense, your comments on that, is that from any IAAO standards or appraisal theory, or is that the assessment department's opinion?
I guess it would be, as far as I know, I guess it would be our opinion. I mean, typically, if you want to stabilize something, you probably want to utilize a little bit of information, and so probably more than a year, and let alone say estimated income versus actual expenses. So we don't feel that it's the most accurate way to stabilize the net operating income for a property. And you know, the cap rates that we've calculated are utilizing 3 years of stabilized income and expenses, their actual rent and expenses. And so we feel that's a more accurate way of stabilizing the net operating income for a property for cap rate calculation.
Okay, and then in terms of sale number 5, McPhillips, where you state incorrectly stabilized, you're aware that the rents were below market at the time of purchase?
It could potentially be the case, but there is known information for the property. So I feel using the known information directly prior to the sale is the more accurate way to calculate the cap rate.
Okay. So sale 5, it's a pretty new building, rents below CMHC. In your opinion, would a REIT not have realized that? And therefore they're purchasing a different opportunity?
It just seems kind of strange that a brand new building would charge rents that are below what they could charge. And so I would think that they would probably charge as much rent as they could.
But have you looked at any of the information since? Because then you would see that they were below market and they did charge higher rents after.
That may or may not be the case, but with regards to calculating the cap rate, we feel it's more accurate to use the known information at hand, because like if you're going to project rent, you're also going to have to project the expenses as well. And not only that, but you're also going to have to, you would think that if they're going to be able to charge more rent, that they would expect the value of the property to be higher as well. So that would have to be considered in terms of calculating your cap rate. But rather than doing sort of all sorts of adjustments for projected income and expenses and the value of the property, we feel it's more appropriate to use known information, which is the known income and expenses for the property and the known sale price for the property.
Okay, that would conclude my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burhan, do you have questions on the assessor's rebuttal evidence?
I do not, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt.
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and neither do I. Mr. Wong, do you have any desire for summation?
I guess no. I guess just a little bit of a comment on the rebuttal that the applicant presented.
This is about summation now, not rebuttal.
No, it was comment on the rebuttal, which maybe I didn't get a chance to do at that time.
Go ahead.
I guess there was a comment saying that the cap rates below 4.5% shouldn't be relied upon. But in my experience, cap rates below 4.5% are relied upon for appraisal purposes, and I would say maybe have been relied upon for affordable housing properties. So I'm not sure how accurate sort of not relying on cap rates that are below 4.5%, and that I guess with regards to how we calculate our cap rates, we calculate our cap rates based off of known historical information and not projected info. Projected info, you're going to have to guesstimate projected income, expenses, and value, and it's just that's just a lot of projecting to try to calculate something. So the cap rates that we've presented are calculated based off of known information. But I guess that would be everything.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Ms. Cates?
I'll do a brief summation. So property is social housing. It is different, should be valued different. We're very transparent. We provide a whole cap rate study and all of our logic surrounding any adjustments. The city's presented sales, but they've not really shown most of the workups unless it's in the form of rebuttal. So I think we've presented a more fulsome case for this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Okay, that concludes item number 1. We've heard one of our 8 items on the agenda. It's been an hour. I know that a lot of these issues are going to overlap now, so I think we all appreciated the very fulsome discussion on this one item, because I'm sure they're now transferred to the next 7. With respect to the rebuttal evidence that I know will be presented for each of the next 7 items also, we don't need to go through it in great detail unless you want to add something that you have not added previously. I will give you the opportunity to, maybe if you can just summarize, we need to enter it into the record that it was presented for the case. If you can just summarize it and maybe make a couple statements, or if there's something new you'd like to add, of course, we would like to hear that. So, and ditto going forward with the next 7 items, I'm sure a lot of the issues are similar. So if we can stick to the main issue, which I know is cap rate, let's do that. And I'm sure we can get through the docket easily today. Okay, so let's move on then to item number 2. And that is 394 Keenly Side Street, pardon me. Mr. Wong.
The subject property is 394 Keenly Side Street. The file number is 24-2983. The roll number is 020-511-55000. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is 11,031,000. This is a commercial row house that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1971 and it has 91 suites with 92 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 4 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $1,254 to get a potential income of $1,370,000. We use a 2.6% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $1,334,000, and we used a 53% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $623,000. Capped at 5.65%, we have an estimated market value of $11,031,000. On page 5 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's in the market and a little bit below what the market might be. On page 6 are some CMHC market rents, which indicate the potential rent to be using CMHC market rents. The potential rent is $1,711,000, and which is about 24% higher than what the model is utilized. So the model rent at $1,370,000 is supported by the CMHC market rent at $1,700,000. On the middle of page 6 are some expense comparables, which show that the model's 53% is supported by the market. And on the bottom of page 6 are some comparable sales that show that the assessed value per unit is at $121,000 is supported by market sales. On page 8 is information on how we derived our cap rates, and on page 9 are some cap rate sales. On page 11 is the market rent report for row houses from CMHC. So once again, we've looked at this as an affordable housing property, as a below average apartment building, and we've utilized rents that are 24% below market, and we've also utilized expenses that are a little bit below market. And the model cap rate is supported by market cap rate sales. Having said that, I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $11,031,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. Gates, do you have questions for the assessor?
Just a few new ones. Thank you. So on your first page, the property is stated as having 3 buildings, but it actually has 16 buildings. Is that correct?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you know if that would influence the modeling of the assessment?
I'm not sure if it would.
Okay.
I'm
And
sorry.
given
The answer is, I guess I don't know, because I don't
Okay.
know the details with regards to whether it takes the number of buildings into consideration or not. I'm not sure about that.
Okay, sounds good. And would you agree that given the scale of this property, the size of it, that it would require a significant amount of maintenance to upkeep?
In my experience, it does appear that these types of properties, these types of parcels, they, in my experience, they do tend to incur more expenses than a if this property was 1 building.
Mhm. And are you aware that a member of your department inspected the property with me as part of the CMC process in spring of 2023?
No.
So you hadn't had a chance to review the photos in preparation for the hearing?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you. That would conclude my new questions, but given that the cap rate issues are still there, I would just ask that the board consider my previous cap rate questions as well.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you have questions for Mr. Wong?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Workham, do you have questions for Mr. Wong?
I'm none at this time, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wong, what is it about this building? I guess double the size, it's got a higher cap rate than your other one. So what is it about this building or the characteristics of this building that would generate a higher cap rate, almost 0.5 of a difference?
I wouldn't be able to say, for sure. The only thing that I can see that is, I guess, noticeably different from the previous property is that this one has 91 units versus 44 units.
Okay, so it's the size potentially.
Yes, because I mean, they're both built in 1971. They're both row houses.
Yeah, okay.
And I guess there would be a location difference too, because the first property was on the west end of the city near the west perimeter, whereas the subject property is more on the east side of the city, near I guess the Concordia Hospital. Or is that right? The Concordia Hospital?
It's close to here.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it basically their locations are noticeably different as well.
Okay, so size of the property or whatever it is, location and something else.
Yeah, those are the two. It seems like those are the two main differences that I can see just by looking at them.
Okay, and Ms. Cates did suggest that it's 16 buildings versus the 3 that you have on your records.
I actually sort of put that down as a note to look into why that might be the case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Go ahead, Ms. Cates.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $9,589,000. On page 4, we have some formatting around the scope of work, but I would just mention that I did see the property in 2023 along with a member of the assessment department as part of the CMC process, and we did an interior and exterior inspection of a variety of units. On page 6, we have the map overview. So in that first aerial image, you could see all of the buildings on the site. So this would be one of the larger Manitoba housing sites in the city. And you could see there are distinct buildings. They're not like all connected as part of kind of 3 long buildings. And then I have some exterior photographs starting on page 7 to get a sampling of what some of the different exteriors of the property look like. On page 8, we have a property description. So the subject property is on Keenly side near its intersection with Kent Road in the Monroe East area. They are 16 2-story row houses built in the early 70s. The units have unfinished basements. The site size is about 7.3 acres. There are 91 units, which include 52 3-bedrooms, 34 bedrooms, and 9 5-bedrooms. And there are 92 outdoor parking stalls noted. So the overview of our income approach starts on page 13. So I would carry over my comments from previous. We're not disputing the NOI, but all of the points that I talked about with the rents being on the low end of the scale, market vacancy, lower end of market expenses would carry through to this property. Page 14, again, the background for the cap rates for social housing. I won't go through it again, but all of the same points would apply as from the previous property. So if you go to page 18, we have the overview of the factors that we looked at for the cap rate. So we are disputing the assessor's cap rate. We're using a cap rate of 6.5%. given the sheer scale of the property, the fact that it's social housing. As well on this one, I would put an adjustment for condition. I have included some interior photos and you could see, so those interior photos start on page 25. And as you go through them, you can see that there is a lot of wear and tear on these suites. So on page 25, it starts with a recently vacated unit. So at these properties, essentially when tenants move out, they'll see what they can salvage at the units and they'll fix things that they have to. So that's why some of these units will sit vacant if they don't necessarily have the funding to fix them up. So you'll see like some holes that would need to be patched. Sometimes flooring, if there's a piece of the flooring, they'll have to like replace the whole floor at times just due to that original flooring not being produced anymore. Then in contrast, on page 35, there's a renovated unit. So essentially, if something to keep in mind would be that for these properties, since they are short on funding, where they are fixing up more elements of the unit, that would be because they had to address all those elements in order for someone new to move in. So there is a range of units of the property, but these renovated units would be only like a handful of properties. And then on page 43, this is a unit that would require significant repair before someone else would be able to occupy the suite. And when you just picture the amount of units of the property, the scale, you know, units that are in this shape aren't necessarily uncommon. That was kind of per the caretaker. And then one more point that I'd like to point out for this property. So we did have the building condition assessment. So Manitoba Housing on some of their properties would conduct a building condition assessment. So they've only done it for a handful where they have them, we've included them. But you'll see on page 24 that when they're looking at the immediate short term of what they would need to do with the property, they're looking at about 3 million in capital work that would be needed for this property in order to address those deferred items. So in tying all that together, our requested assessment of 9,589,000, it works out to 105,000 per unit, which given the condition, the scope of work that would be required from when they had the assessment conducted to the year of physical condition that we're looking at of 2025, I think that this revised value makes a lot of sense for the subject property and still very reasonable. So that would conclude my presentation for this property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, do you have questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan, do you have questions?
I do not, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wong or Ms. Cates, I note that the other properties, or the other property was built in 1971, and you're saying that because of the larger units or the number of units of 91, you're adding a 0.5% cap rate increase compared to the previous property?
Yes, but I wouldn't attribute it only to the size, but the scale of the property is definitely something that we should account for. But what I would also attribute it to is that for the previous property, I hadn't had the opportunity to do an inspection of the interiors. So I wasn't able to necessarily comment on the condition and what was going on at the property. This property, I had more in-depth information. And so I was able to make a more detailed assessment of the property. So when we're looking at social housing properties like row houses like this, typically 6% would be the minimum that we would consider. But if we have more information on the condition, necessary capital, then I do feel that adjustment is warranted. to the cap rate. So I would say it's a variety of factors at play between this property and the prior property.
I thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional questions. So Ms. Cates, you do have rebuttal evidence on
Yes.
this property also, so if you could just perhaps introduce that rebuttal evidence and make a, brief overview of it. That
For
would be
sure.
great, thank you.
So in terms of the rebuttal, just
Do we have it? Is it the same one?
it is.
Okay. Okay, we're just gonna make sure it's in our docket. We can go ahead and do it. the next two.
I have to find it on sales.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry. That was in there. They were just waiting for it. Okay, it's there now. Applicant rebuttal. Okay, go ahead.
So just to summarize the rebuttal that we've submitted, we've looked further into the city's cap rates where better information about what the purchaser could expect was available. We've used that to stabilize based on a properly stabilized income stream. We've provided our workups and backup documentation in full to show exactly where the discrepancy is. We're not simply stating it as unusable. And it's there for your review. So we've gone through a couple of the city's cap rates as well. We're in disagreement with the super low cap rates that the city has. I mean, without seeing all of the workups, it's hard to say exactly what those are all based on, but what we've seen is that the ones that are super low are based on improper income stream. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Wong, do you have questions on the rebuttal?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
I have none, Madam Chairperson.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Ms. Werhan?
I also have none, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, you have rebuttal evidence as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, we're just waiting for it to come into our folders. Okay, it is there now. So, Mr. Wong, please go ahead.
Sure. I guess the summary is on the bottom of page 1, where sales 1 to 3 they utilize 1 year of information, and we feel it is insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income. I mean, stabilizing does involve more than 1 year, or does involve more than just the expenses. So we feel that the sales 1 to 3 are not usable because it wouldn't be very accurate. And sale number 4, there's no actual income expenses involved with the calculation of the net operating income. So we don't feel that would be a very good cap rate. And on sale 5, the potential used by Altus is not based on historical information, which is typically how we would calculate things. So we feel it is incorrectly stabilized.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, questions on the rebuttal?
I have no new questions on the rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, questions on the city's rebuttal?
No, thank you.
Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, summation, Mr. Wong?
No, thank you.
Ms. Cates?
I'm good as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes item 2. Item number 3, 693 David Avenue. David Street. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Wong.
Okay, the subject property is 693 David Street. The file number is 24-3246. The roll number is 072-189-45000. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is $1,641,000. This is a commercial row house that's 2 stories high. It's built in 1971 and has 14 suites with 14 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 4 is our income valuation summary. We do have 2 separate income streams just because that's how our system records these types of parcels, where some of the properties have 4 units or less, or some of the buildings have 4 units or less, and some of the buildings have 5 units or more. On page 5 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are supported by the market. On page 6 are some market comparable information. On the top is the CMHC market rents. You can see that the model rent potential at $189,000 is supported by the CMHC market rent of $276,000, which is 45% higher. So the CMHC market rents supports the model assigned rents. And on the middle of page 6 are some expense comparables. So the expense comparables being 48 and 49%, they support the model expense ratio of 56%. And the bottom chart on page 6 are some sales comparables. So the sales comparables might range from 120,000 per unit to 210,000 per unit, and this supports the assessed value per unit at 117,000. On page 7 are some pictures of the sales comparables. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 11 is the chart for CMHC market rents. And on the last page is a permit from 2010. There's this permit on page 12, but there's also 3 permits in total, which are similar, which indicate new windows, doors, siding, insulation, and mechanical work for each of the 3 buildings. So once again, we did value this property as if it was affordable housing, and we looked at it as if we valued it as if it was a below average apartment building, using rents that are 45% below what CMHC market rents are, it might indicate. So the exterior alterations in 2010 regarding new windows and doors and insulation do indicate that this property is maintained. The model expenses and cap rate are supported by market cap rates and market expenses. So having said that, I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $1,641,000.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, do you have questions for the assessor?
Just a couple, thanks. So for your cap rate table on page 8, in the 3rd paragraph, the broker cap rates are stated to further support the assessment department's cap rates. Is that correct?
Is that what it? Yeah.
Okay. So in looking at the subject property, which would be like a low-rise B, do you agree that the brokers are suggesting 5% as the minimum value?
Potentially, but just like, you know, at ours is indicating 4.75 to 5.45, we do have cap rates that are lower than 4.75 and higher than 5.45. I'm not sure about what the details are, or if there are any cap rates that might be lower or higher than the ranges indicated by Colliers or CBRE or Cushman.
But to be fair, the ranges are what you've included and they're not showing anything lower than 5%. Is that correct?
That's what they're indicating the range to be.
Okay, so the subject property at a 4.85%. Is that the city suggesting that this would be one of the best investments in the city?
No, it's just sometimes the majority of the affordable housing appraisals that I've seen, they have cap rates that are in the low end of the range, actually in the 4% range. And so you know what, appraisers are using cap rates that are around 4% plus or minus for affordable housing type properties. So I'm not sure if a lower cap rate is an indication of it being the best property.
So those appraisals, you have not provided any of those nor read up on the limiting conditions or anything going into those appraisals, correct?
With regards to, that's just my experience with some of the appraisals that I've seen. And so it just sort of differs from anything, differs from the statement that you might have made, is all I'm saying.
Okay. That will conclude my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Merritt, do you have questions for the assessor?
Yes, Madam. Mr. Wong, you had stated that the condition is classified as below average, but some renovations went in here to the tune of $188,000, consisting of new windows, new sidings, and doors, and who knows what else. And yet you're using a cap rate of 4.85. So, comments?
Sure. I mean, the cap rate of 4.85, it's sort of yielding an estimated value of about 117,000 per unit. And so when you look at some, like in the end, we're trying to estimate what the market value might be. And when you look at the market value being potentially ranges from, like on my page 6, it would range from about 120,000 to 210,000. I feel that our estimate of value of 117,000 is at the bottom end of the range. And so I just look at it from the standpoint that utilizing a 4.8% cap rate with this estimated net operating income, it results in a estimated market value that is, I guess, in line with the market.
All right. Just one other question. There's a class code 10 and a 20 on here. So that's in regards to the number of units, correct?
Yeah. Just in this particular property has 3 buildings. There might be one building in there where it has 4 units, but it might have 2 buildings that have 5 units. And that's the difference between class code 10 and 20 is class code 10 is 4 units or less, and class code 20 is 5 units or more. And that's just how our system makes us enter in the buildings.
I thank you, Mr. Wong. Thank you.
Ms. Burhan, do you have questions for the assessor?
I do not, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I was also interested in that class 10, class 20 split too. I know it doesn't make a difference, but just, I was just
you just sort of lump them together and that's what it is.
And that's what it is, exactly. Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Cates.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $1,326,000. On page 6, we have the property images, the aerial overview, and the Google map view. And then some exterior photographs on page 7, 7 and 8. On page 9, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on David Street, is north of Portage Avenue, and it's in the Crestview area of Winnipeg. The property consists of 3 row house buildings built in the early 70s. There are 14 units, which are 10 3-bedroom units and 4 4-bedroom units. And there is 1-to-1 parking at the property. The overview of our income approach starts on page 14. So we're not disputing the NOI, and similar comments from the prior files would carry through here. We have the cap rates for social housing on page 15. On page 19, we have our overview of the factors we've looked at for this property. So we are disputing the cap rate of 4.85%. We're using a cap rate of 6%. Now, if the market information, the brokers are saying 5% minimum for a low rise B type of property, which the subject would be, or would maybe even be lower than that, then to say 4.85 is to actually say that this is one of the best investments in the city. Cap rate is a measure of the risk of the investment. So I think that that is far too low for this type of property. They have done some capital in the form of windows and exterior, but that's capital that would have been required. These properties built in the 70s are getting aged, and they do have to put that work in to keep them functioning. So I would suggest that these permits and the work that's been put in is fixing capital items and isn't necessarily atypical or unusual for the characteristics of this property. So we're doing a 0.5% adjustment to the cap rate to get to a cap rate of 6%. While I haven't been in the interiors of the units, just looking at the photos of the exteriors, to me, this appears to be somewhere in the below average range in terms of kind of how these properties present themselves. So I would say they're probably somewhere between average to below average. I haven't necessarily done a condition adjustment to the properties, but I would note that they don't appear to be as kept as some of the other properties. So if you turn to page 21, we have our valuation spreadsheet. So we have a net operating income of 79,563, and with the 6% cap rate, we get a value of 1,326,000, which is about 95,000 per unit, which is consistent with some of the previous properties that we've looked at. It's within a similar range. And then in terms of just touching on some comments regarding appraisals, one of the key with appraisals is that they have a lot of conditions and notes as part of the valuation conclusion. So you can't really remove those conclusions that they may or may not be making without looking at the purpose of the appraisal and the conditions surrounding that appraisal. So that's just a bit of a summary comment I would make on kind of appraisals below like 4% cap rates. Without seeing them, I wouldn't put any reliance on that type of information. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Wong, questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Werhan?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you very much. So, Ms. Cates, I noticed that in your summary, your spreadsheet, on page 21, you don't break it down between class 10 and class 20. So, are you just accepting the city's NOI on both of those pieces?
Yes. Should I read them in?
Yes, please, if you can.
Okay. So on the class code 10, we'll be using an NOI of 22,732 with a 6% cap rate. And on class code 20, we'll be using an NOI of 56,831 with a 6% cap rate.
Okay, and did you calculate the final numbers for those?
Separately?
Yeah.
I hadn't, I can.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, let me just do that
I mean, I've done it, but I just want to make sure You've done it.
Yeah, so on the class code 10,
Yeah. Yeah.
on the class code 10, I'm getting a value of 378,866 and then 0.6667.
So rounded 379.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the class code 20, I'm getting a value of 947,183.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, I guess that's it for my questions. We do have rebuttal, so Ms. Cates, you'll go first on the rebuttal. We just need to make sure, okay, it's in there. And Mr. Wong, you're gonna have rebuttal also, correct?
Correct.
Correct, okay, so, all right, Ms. Cates.
So just to summarize the rebuttal, we've recalculated some of the cap rates based on better information, more updated information that the purchaser would have had at the time of purchase, and all of that information is provided, the backup documentation and the calculations, and then other cap rates that we've disagreed with are kind of in our own cap rate study. So just kind of putting the most pertinent information in the rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, questions on the rebuttal?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt,
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Werhan,
None, thank you.
thank you very much. And I have no questions. And Mr. Wong, you also have rebuttal.
Correct.
Can you summarize that for the
Sure.
record?
Just on my page 1, you can see that sales 1 to 3 utilize 1 year of income and expense information. We feel it's insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income. Not really stabilizing anything if it's only 1 year or just the expenses. On sale number 4, there's no actual income and expenses involved in the calculation of the net operating income. And on page 5, the potential income utilized by Altus is not historically reported information, so we don't feel it's correctly stabilized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, questions on the city's rebuttal?
I have no good questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, questions on the assessor's rebuttal?
I have no questions, please, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I have no questions either on the rebuttal. Mr. Wong, would you like to make a summary?
No, thank you.
Ms. Cates?
I'm good as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairperson, can we
Yes.
have a little break?
Yes, of course. How about 10 minutes?
Absolutely.
10 minutes, okay, it's 2:42. How about we resume at 2:50? 8 minutes. That's file number 24-3248, 42 Dawnwood Drive. Mr. Wong.
Okay. The subject property is 42 Dawnwood Drive. The file number is 24-3248. The roll number is 040-019-04600. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is $8,350,000. This is a commercial row house that's 2 stories high. It's built in 1972 and has 66 suites with 66 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. It's just near Henderson and Chief Pagos Trail. On page 4 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $1,322 to get a potential income of $1,047,000. We used a 2.6% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $1,020,000. And we used a 52% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $480,000. Capped at 5.75%, we have an estimated market value of $8,350,000. On page 5 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's in the market. On page 6 are some market information. On the top of page 6 are the CMHC market rent chart. The model rent potential of $1,047,000 is supported by the CMHC market rent potential, which is at $1,189,000. which is about 13% higher. In the middle of page 6 are some expense comparables between 40 and 49%. This supports the model's expense ratio of 52.94%. And on the bottom of page 6 are some comparable sales that range from 120 to 210,000 per unit, and which supports the assessed value per unit of 127,000. On page 7 are some pictures of the sales comparables. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 11 is the rent chart from CMHC, indicating what the CMHC market rents are. So this is an affordable housing property. It's been valued as if it was a below average apartment, using rents that are 13% below CMHC market rents. The model rent and cap rate is supported by the market as well. So I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $8,350,000.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Ms. Cates, do you have questions for the assessor?
Yeah, just a couple. So similar to Keenly side, are you aware that a member of the department inspected the property with me as part of the CMC process?
No, I'm not.
So similarly, you had not had the chance to review the photos then, would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And my other cap rate questions would carry through to this property.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Mr. Merritt, do you have questions for the assessor?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Workman?
I'm none, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no questions. Mr. Long, you will be introducing your rebuttal evidence later also on this one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Cates.
Okay, so if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $7,682,000. On page 4, we have our scope of work. So we did visit this property, in May of 2023 with the assessor, and we did an interior and exterior inspection of the property. On page 6, we have our map overview, so you can see the size of the site and the buildings on it, as well as a Google map view of where it is in the neighborhood. Starting on page 7, we have some exterior photographs of the buildings. And then page 8 is a photograph from the back of the property. Page 9, we have our property description. So the subject property is on Donwood Drive, north of its intersection with Sutton in the Rossmere A area. There are 12 two-story row house buildings built in the early 70s, and the units have unfinished basements. The site size is about 4.3 acres, and there are 66 units, which include 16 two-bedrooms, 30 three-bedrooms, and 24 bedroom units, and there are 66 parking stalls noted. On page 14, we have the overview of our income approach. So we're not disputing the NOI. Page 15, we have the overview of our cap rates for social housing. And then page 17, we have the discussion on low income tenancy. So page 19, we have our overview of the cap rate for the subject property. We are disputing the cap rate of 5.75%. We're using a cap rate of 6.25% based on our cap rate study. So similar idea as to Keenly side, although the site is not as large, though still quite a few buildings on the site at 12 buildings. So we're doing a 0.75 adjustment up to 6.25%. I would ask you to turn to the appendix. So page 24 starts some interior photos of the subject property. So we start with a recently vacated unit, so you can see some need to replace the floors, new paint, and based on what we know about these properties from a lot of the visits we've done, if you have to replace some of the floor, typically you have to replace the whole thing because they don't necessarily make that original tile that they used to use. So that's kind of an interesting feature in terms of the replacements that just kind of adds up in terms of cost. So you see some elements that need to be refurbished here. Then moving through the photos, I have a renovated unit starting on page 36. So you could see that different flooring, cabinets, but again, only a handful of units would be renovated to that degree, and it will be based on a need to fix pretty much every key item in the unit. Otherwise, they would salvage what they can. And then starting on page 44, we have a unit that would require significant repair. And in talking to the caretaker when we visited this property and asked if this is something that was unusual, he said it wasn't. So again, when you look at the scale of these type of properties and some of the damage that the units can incur, it speaks to the need for a cap rate adjustment to account for those extra costs. So just to tie up the presentation, so our requested value at $7,682,000 is about $116,000 per unit, within the range of the other properties that we're looking at today. So I would ask that the board revise the assessment to our requested value based on the evidence presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan, questions?
None, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, I do have one, and I probably should have asked it last time too. On your page 19, under suite mix, this is the site-specific adjustments. Suite mix, high proportion of larger suites, 3 and 4 bedroom. You note 4-bedroom units not typically seen. So is a 4-bedroom unit not seen to be a positive thing in the market, or is it?
Yeah, so I haven't necessarily, I didn't do an adjustment for the suite mix. I just thought it was something that was interesting to note, that another element of these social housing properties is that when we're looking at these larger suites, it would be considered atypical when you start having these 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom units. So I would say that typically a rental of that many bedrooms would not be seen as desirable, based on the fact that private developers in the market just hasn't, replicated that to the same degree as social housing. But I haven't made an adjustment. I figured it was worth pointing out.
Okay. Okay. Because it does say Altus will consider site-specific adjustments based on the following factors. So I thought you had included that as one of the factors.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It was a bit vague.
Okay. But it's really related to the social housing side, the low income tenancy condition in this case.
Mhm.
And was there, similar to the previous property on Keenly side, was there a building condition assessment done on this one by MHRC?
They hadn't completed a building condition assessment on this
Okay.
one.
Okay, thank you very much. You have rebuttal evidence also, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just get to that. 4. Okay, go ahead whenever you're ready,
This is a summary of the rebuttal.
please.
So to summarize the rebuttal, we have completed some alternate calculations based on more updated, more accurate information about what would have been in the mind of the purchaser. And we've provided all of the supporting documentation for those for your review. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, questions on the rebuttal?
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt.
I have none, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you, Ms. Werhan.
None, thank you.
And I have none. So, Mr. Wong, your rebuttal?
Yes. On page 1 of my rebuttal is, you see the bottom of my page 1, indicating that sales 1 to 3 are based off of 1 year's income and expense information, and we feel it's insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income using 1 year's information, or in some cases just the expenses and projected incomes. The sale 4 has no actual income and expenses involved in the calculation of a net operating income, so it doesn't seem like it would be very reliable. And sale 5, Altus has utilized the potential gross income utilized by Altus is not based on historical reported information, so we feel it's incorrectly stabilized.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates?
No new questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you.
Thank you, and I have no questions either. Mr. Wong, would you care for summation?
No, thank you.
Ms. Cates?
I'm good as well, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes item number 4. I will now move to item number 5, and I am assuming there's rebuttal evidence from both of you on item number 5 also?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Wong, we're on file number 24-3044, 715 Llewellyn.
The subject property is 715 Llewellyn Street. The file number is 24-3044. The roll number is 020-612-09000. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is $7,048,000. This is a commercial row house that's 1 to 2 stories high. It's built in 1971 and it has 58 suites with 58 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 5 is our income valuation summary. Once again, there's the 2 income streams with the class code 10 and class code 20. On page 5 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are supported by the market. On page 6 are some market comparables for rent, expenses, and sales. On the top of page 6, the model rent potential of $920,000 is supported by the CMHC market rent of $1,090,000, which is 18% higher than what the model is estimated. The model expenses at 52% are supported by the market comparables, which range from 48 to 49%. And on the bottom of page 6 are some sales comparables that's range from 120 to 210,000 per unit, and this supports the assessed value per unit at 122,000. On page 7 are some pictures of the sales comparables. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 11 is the CMHC market rent report for row houses. So this is affordable housing. It is valued as if it was a below average apartment building using rents that are 18% below CMHC market rents and expenses that are higher than market. The model rent and cap rates are supported by the market, and I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $7,048,000.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, questions?
No new questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you.
Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you.
Thank you, and I have no questions. So, Ms. Cates.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, you'll see our requested assessment of $6,342,000. On page 6, we have our maps, so the aerial map and the Google map view. On page 7, we have some exterior photographs from the front and the back of the property. On page 9, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on Luelda at the southeast corner of its intersection with Kimberly Avenue in the Valley Gardens area. There are 10 two-story row house buildings built in the early 70s. The site size is about 3.5 acres. There are 58 units, which include 48 3-bedrooms and 10 4-bedrooms. And there are 58 outdoor parking stalls noted. We have the overview of our income approach on page 14. The cap rate information for social housing starting on page 15. So if you move to page 19, we have the overview of the cap rate for the subject property. We are disputing the assessor's cap rate of 5.4%. We're using a cap rate of 6%, similar to the other properties. It is a large site. I note the condition is average, just as I haven't had the opportunity to see it, so I'm not making an adjustment for that condition. So based on the size of the site, the amount of building systems to maintain, the fact that it is social housing, we feel a 0.5% premium to the cap rate makes sense. So the value of $6,342,000 works out to $109,000 per unit, which is within range of the other properties we're seeing. So on page 21, we have the evaluation sheet overview. So the total NOI is $380,494. But I'll just state for the record, so for the class code 10 portion, we'd be using an NOI of $52,496 with a 6% cap rate. And then for the class code 20 portion, we'd be using an NOI of $328,098 with a 6% cap rate. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cates. Mr. Wong, do you have questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan, questions?
None, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Thank you so much. Now we will go to your rebuttal evidence, Ms. Cates.
Okay.
Just know it's getting a little repetitive.
Yeah,
It's for the record.
Yeah, just to summarize, we've put some alternate calculations based on updated information, speaks to the principle of anticipation in real estate, and all the background documentation and the workups are provided for your review. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, questions on the rebuttal?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt,
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions. Mr. Wong, your rebuttal?
Okay. Yeah, for on the bottom of page 1, just a summary indicating that scales 1 to 3 utilize 1 year of income and expenses, and it's insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income. And sale number 4 has no actual income and expenses involved in the calculation of the net operating income. And on sale 5 indicates that the potential gross income utilized by Altus is not based on historically reported information prior to the sale. So we don't feel it is correctly stabilized.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, questions on the assessor's rebuttal?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Werhan. Questions on
None,
the,
thank you.
Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you.
Thank you, and I have no questions either. Mr. Wong, desire for summation?
No, thank you.
Ms. Cates?
I'll just do a brief summation since the next property is not social. So social housing, distinct, should be valued different. Since you're doing a valuation of market for the income, vacancy, and expenses, all of the elements of risk tied to social housing should be captured in the cap rate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes item number 5. Now move to item number 6. And again, you'll both have rebuttal evidence for item number 6. Yes,
Yes, correct.
yes, okay, thank you. All right, item number 6, file number 24-3436 1481 Molson Street. When you are ready, Mr. Wong.
Okay, the subject property is 1481 Molson Street. The file number is 24-3436. The roll number is 040-072-55790. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is 18,963,000. This is a commercial row house that's 3 stories high. It was built in 2021, and there are 96 suites with 128 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 4 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $1,396 to get a potential income of $1,608,000. We used a 2.6% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $1,566,000. We used a 41% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $910,000. Capped at 4.8%, we have an estimated market value of $18,963,000. On page 5 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are supported by the market. On the bottom are some expense comparables for some newer row houses, which range from 38 to 39%. I believe these comparables support the model's expense ratio at 41.9%. On page 6 and 7 is information on how we derived our cap rates, along with some cap rate sales. On page 9 is some information on the permits. There are 4 permits, 1 for each building. The declared construction value for each is $4,250,000. The total declared construction value is about 17 million. And if you take the total of the declared construction value plus land, that would be 17 million plus 2,550,000 for the land, for a total of 19,550,000, and that does include any sort of entrepreneurial profit which someone would expect for building or developing, constructing such a property. So I believe that this more than supports the current assessed value at 18,963,000. On page 10 is the permit is one of the 4 permits that was taken out. On page 11 is some information on the new townhomes. And on page 12 and 13 are some pictures of the subject property. Would be all from the website for the apartment building or for the townhomes. So this is a new building, and for new buildings, we don't have any historical income and expense information to rely on. So we're looking at the market for valuing this property. The model rents and expenses and cap rate that the model is assigned are all supported by the market, and outside of rent, expenses, and cap rate, when you look at the permit value and permit and land value of 19,500,000, I believe it probably more than supports the current assessed value of 18,963,000. Having said that, I ask that you maintain the assessed value at 18,963,000.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. So on page 9, you would agree this isn't a like proper cost approach, correct?
This is not a, I guess, a proper cost approach.
Okay, and would you also agree that cost doesn't necessarily equal value?
I'm not really too sure, but like if I was a developer, I wouldn't spend $20 million on something for it to be worth $15 million. And so that's kind of how I would look at it.
Okay, so you don't agree, or
It, I guess I'm not sure.
okay, sounds good. That would conclude my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Merritt.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Wong, there looks like there's a sale for the land in 2021 of 2,550,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And like you say, the permits total 17 million for all 4 properties or all 4 buildings, and they're all 3-story.
I believe there looks, yeah, it appears so, yes.
Okay. And there's 96 units in there.
Yes.
And the largest units are consisting of 72 3-bedroom units, correct? Mr.
Yes.
Wong? Okay. And there's 128 outdoor parking. So there's ample parking to the building.
Yes.
I have no further questions, madam.
Thank you very much. Ms. Werhan.
I'm just trying to look at the, I'm sorry, the parking, just the numbers seem to have gotten away.
Just on page 1, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. Why can't I? I got it. Thank you so much. No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, I'm looking at your comparables on page 5. So you indicated you don't have an income and expense statement yet for this property, correct? Because it's new.
Correct.
So you had to go to the market to get an estimate here for your model.
Yes.
Okay, so your comparables, can you tell me where they are? Are they in the neighborhood, first of all? Are they in the same market region? And second of all, there's a large difference in suite mix. So how did you arrive at these comparables to give you a good estimate or confidence in your model?
I guess the main area where I would be confident is like all the comparables are row houses, and
Okay.
unfortunately there aren't like an abundance of row house comparables that you could look at to try to I guess support the subject property. But so you kind of take the row houses that are available. With regards to the location, the one on Chevry, I guess, is just off Pembina. It would be on the south end of the city. The one, I'm not sure where Fiorentino and Premac are, but Camille Sis is in the east part of the city, just as the subject property is. And also, I guess, the fact that the comparables are row houses and the fact that they are also newer row houses, I believe that these are almost maybe as good as you can get in terms of comparables, even though the suite mixes don't quite line up.
Okay. And just in terms of that suite mix, is it safe to say that you know, a 4-bedroom unit would cost more than a 1-bedroom unit to rent.
Yeah,
So would that drive your average monthly rent per unit up if there's a preponderance of 4-bedroom or 3-bedroom units compared to 1 and 2-bedroom units?
yes, yes, it would. Typically, it would. But just for example, if you look at the 875 Camille Sis, it is comprised of mostly 3 bedrooms, but the comparable rent is also noticeably higher than the subject property rent
Right.
that has been assigned by the model.
Right. Okay, I'm just looking at the comparability of them, of the samples you picked.
Yeah, yeah, no, it would be nice to have maybe more more comparable new row houses, but I believe that this might be as good as it gets as far as I know.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. Okay, I have no additional questions, so Ms. Kate.
Okay, if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $18,077,000. On page 6, we have our property maps. Page 7, an exterior photograph of the subject. Page 8, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on the east side of Molson Street, north of Grassley Boulevard in the Eaglemere area. The property consists of 4 buildings and they're 3 stories plus basement. They were built in 2021. Site size is approximately 2.5 acres. And there are 96 units, which include 8 bachelor suites, 12 1-bedrooms, 72 2-bedrooms, and 4 3-bedrooms. And based on the information from the owner, I concluded there was closer to 90 parking stalls, not over 100, as far as I could tell. So that's what I've used for the purpose of the analysis today. And I would just note that the property received occupancy permits from November of 22 to January of 23. So we don't have fulsome expense data to use. So if you go to page 13, we have the overview of our income approach. So in terms of the rents, I used a very similar value to what the assessor had. I relied on the rents from the December 2022 statement that I received, and then I extrapolated it over a full year. And then just in keeping with the analysis of the income, I've added a parking income of $60 per stall for the 90 stalls. So the NOI is not an issue. But like I said, just due to the lack of fulsome data, we're accepting the expense allowance of 41.9% of EGI. Typically for new apartments, we would expect to see expenses in the high 30% to the low 40% range. It makes sense that this property is a bit on that higher range, given that it's a row house with multiple buildings, wood frame, multiple systems to maintain. And then on page 14, we have the overview of our cap rate. So we're disputing the cap rate of 4.8%, and we're applying a cap rate of 5.25%, which is within the range of cap rates we would look at for new builds. The base cap rate that we would start at for a new build would be 5%. And then given the multiple buildings row house, we're doing a 5.25%. It is brand new and the condition is good right now. When you look at these type of properties over the longer term, they tend to deteriorate at a faster rate than a standard apartment. So we're still within the range of the cap rate, but going a little bit higher than the absolute base rate. So if you turn to page 16, we have the overview. So we're using a higher NOI, admittedly, at $949,017. And with the 5.25% cap rate, gives a value of $18,077,000 rounded. It works out to about $188,000 per unit. And these suites are on the smaller end. So that does make sense. And then in the appendix, starting on page 18, I've just included some of the marketing photos from the website for your review. So you can see some of the finishes. These finishes are fairly typical of what we see of new builds, stainless appliances, modern looking suites. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Long, do you have questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan, questions for Ms. Cates?
Yeah, alongside that's where my confusion was the parking. Have you inspected this property?
I've not inspected the property. Essentially the parking count was from my review of their detailed rent roll where they showed how many parking stalls were rented out. So, and given that the later rent roll that I reviewed was now occupied, I presume that would be the total of parking stalls. I didn't include the detailed rent roll just because it was quite a few pages and lots of tenant names to go in and redact, but that's kind of where the discrepancy, but I did not physically inspect the property.
Okay, because that's quite a discrepancy from the 128 that Mr. Wong has stated. Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Cates, you've added parking income of 64,800.
Yes.
Okay. So if I cap that at your rate of 5.25, that's a value just for that of 1,200,000. So I'm just wondering, we have not seen anything like this before where you've added the parking separately. So I just want to know why. I guess mainly because it's maybe a new building, possibly, but it's a little. I just want to know the reasons why you added the close to $65,000 for parking.
Yeah, it's a fair question. So in terms of this valuation, given that it's a market housing, it's a new build, I wanted to value it the same way that we would value other market housing, new builds, or even other market housing where we would add in that parking income stream. So yeah, that actually makes our NOI higher, but I wanted to do it to be consistent with how we would typically look at these properties, because you would expect an income stream from the parking here. When we're looking at the social housing properties, the lower quality properties, there's not always a guaranteed income stream from when you're looking at lower quality properties. Reason being that typically older stock or lower quality stock might have to throw in other benefits in terms of having tenants attracted to that property. And that's something that we've seen when we've looked at those lower end rental comparables. So it's not necessarily a given that those would have a parking income stream, but in going back to the social housing properties, when the assessor is doing their income stream, they're kind of assuming that everything's included, like they're not parsing out rent and parking. So when we're going in and we're utilizing those same NOIs, then we don't include an extra stream for parking. I don't know if that clarifies or if I should.
Well, it answers how you went about it, but normally what happens is you have 96 units. It's an awful lot of units to rent. So the landlord would probably give some tenant inducements. So sometimes rent's included, or sometimes there might be a month's free rent, or maybe two, So I'm just wondering, the justification in regards to the $65,000. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I guess I could have not included it, but I wanted to stay consistent. A new apartment, they would be getting an income stream for parking. So I felt it was appropriate to add that in.
Okay, I thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions, Ms. Cates, so your rebuttal evidence, I guess, is where we're at now. I'm assuming you have it. We have it here. It should be there. It should be there. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so just to summarize, we've done some alternative workups to the city's cap rates based on more current information that the purchaser would have had at the time of purchase. It's based on the principle of anticipation of the income stream they could reasonably expect to achieve based on accurate information, either from brokers or vendors, et cetera. All those supporting documents are there for your review. That would conclude my rebuttal summary.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, questions on the rebuttal?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan,
None, thank you.
Mr. Merritt.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Wong, you have rebuttal also?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So on my page one, at the bottom of my page one is a summary indicating for sales 1 to 3 that there is only 1 year of income and expenses, and it's insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income. And for sale number 4, that there was no actual income and expenses involved in the calculation of the net operating income. So I don't feel it's very usable or very reliable. And on for sale 5, their potential gross income utilized by Altus is not based off of historically reported information. And so we feel that's incorrectly stabilized.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, question on the rebuttal?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, questions on the rebuttal?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, do you desire summation?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates?
I'm good as well, thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes item 6. Item number 7, again, I am assuming rebuttal evidence for both of you again.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving to item 7, 24-3309, 265 Gordon Avenue. Mr. Wong.
The subject property is 265 Gordon Avenue. The file number is 24-3309. The roll number is 140-837-50200. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is $4,865,000. On, I guess on the bottom of my page 1, it indicates that the subject property is a commercial row house. It's 1 to 2 stories high. It was built in 1972, and it has 37 units with 22 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 4 is our income valuation summary, which indicates a market value per unit of $131,000. On page 5 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are supported by the market. On page 6, on the top of page 6 are some market rents from CMHC that indicate that the model rent at $571,000 is supported by the CMHC market rent of $666,000, which is about 16% higher. And the expense comparables from 48 to 49% supports the model expense ratio of 52%. And the assessed value per unit of $132,000 is supported by some market sales that range from 120 to 210,000 per unit. On page 7 are some pictures of the comparable sales. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 11 is a chart with the CMHC market rents. So this is another property from Manitoba Housing. And we valued it the same way as the other properties where we've valued it as a below average apartment building by using average rents that are 16% below what CMHC indicates are market rents, and by using expenses that are higher than what might be in the market. The model rents are supported by the market, and as is the model cap rate. So I ask you maintain the assessed value at $4,865,000.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates.
I have no new questions to add, just my previous questions on the social housing properties.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan, do you have questions for Mr. Long?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Ms. Cates?
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, you'll see our requested assessment of $4,203,000. On page 6, we have our property maps. And then on page 7, I've provided some current exterior photos. So some of the buildings are still quite original. And then one of them got kind of the exterior refaced. So that's kind of there so you can get a picture of the property. On page 10, we have the property description. So the subject property is located on the north side of Gordon Avenue, near its intersection with Stadacona Street in the Chalmers area. There are 8 two-story row house buildings built in 1972. The site is about 2.8 acres. There are 37 units, including 9 2-bedrooms, 17 3-bedrooms, and 11 4-bedrooms, and there are 22 outdoor parking stalls noted. On page 14, we have the overview of our income approach, some cap rate information to follow. And on page 20, we have our cap rate information for the subject property. So we're disputing the cap rate of 5.4%, and we're using a cap rate of 6.25%, starting at a base cap rate of 5.5%, done an adjustment of 0.75% based on the number of buildings, the social housing, and as well as the location. Chalmers would be considered an inferior area compared to some of the other locations that we've looked at. So the value of that we're requesting of $4,203,000 works out to about $113,000 per unit, which is consistent with the other properties. On page 22, we have the valuation spreadsheet. So you can see the NOI of $262,702, cap rate of 6.25%, gives the indicated value of $4,203,000. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan?
None, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt? Oh, you're on mute, Mr. Merritt.
Sorry, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Cates, this again is a property that's split between 2 property classes. So would you be able to provide for me the NOIs that you used for each of the 2 property classes?
For sure. It's my apologies. I didn't realize that for this one.
That's quite all right.
Class code 10, NOI of $113,601 with a cap rate of 6.25%. And class code 20 with an NOI of $149,101 with a cap rate of 6.25%.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, and Ms. Cates, you have rebuttal evidence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. So our rebuttal, we've included some alternative calculations to the city's cap rates based on information the purchaser would have known at the time of sale regarding the income they could expect to achieve. This is a more accurate means of cap rate analysis. All the background documentation is there for your review. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Questions, Mr. Wong?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Werhan.
None, thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Wong, your rebuttal?
Yes, on the bottom of my page 1 is the summary where sales 1 to 3, they use 1 year of income expenses information, which is insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income. And on sale 4, it doesn't use any actual income or expenses to calculate the net operating income. So we don't feel that would be very accurate. And the potential gross income utilized by Altus is not based on historically reported information. And so we feel it's incorrectly stabilized.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, questions on the rebuttal?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you.
Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you.
Thank you, and I have no questions. Mr. Wong, do you desire summation?
No, thank you.
Ms. Cates?
I'm good as well.
Thank you. Okay. We are now on the final item of our agenda, 24-2774, 145 Carriage Road. Is there rebuttal on these ones as well? This one as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for that. All right, Mr. Wong.
The subject property is 145 Carriage Road. The file number is 24-2774. The roll number is 074-333-87000. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is 10,005,000. This is a commercial row house that's 1 to 2 stories high. It was built in 1971, and it has 75 units with 75 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 4 is our income valuation summary, where the market value per unit is 133,000. On page 5 are some comparable rents showing that the rents we've used are supported by the market. On page 6 are some CMHC market rents comparables, indicating that the model potential of 1,190,000 is supported by the CMHC market rent of 1,478,000, which is about 24% higher. And the expenses comparables that range from 48 to 49% support the model's expense ratio of 52%. And on the bottom of page 6 are some comparable sales that range from 120 to 210,000 per unit, which supports the assessed value per unit at 134,000. On page 7 are some pictures of the sales comparables. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 11 is the CMHC market rents chart for row houses. And on page 12 and 13 are some inspection photos from December 2023. So this property is owned by Manitoba Housing, and it is affordable housing. We've valued this property as if it was a below average apartment building by using rents that are 26% below the CMHC market rent, and by using expenses that are higher than what might be typical in the marketplace. So the model rents and the model expenses are supported by the market. So I ask that you maintain the assessed value at 10,005,000.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, questions for Mr. Wong?
Yes, just one. The inspection photos in the brief, Are those your photos or were they from someone else in the department?
I believe it was. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it was from our department.
But they're not your photos, correct? Like, did you visit the property?
Um, I I do not know.
Okay. That concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Merritt, do you have questions for Mr. Wong?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Werhan.
None, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Wong, just following up on these inspection photos, did you yourself take these photos or did somebody else?
If I did take them, I don't remember.
You don't
And,
remember that? Okay. Busy
all
time.
I know is that these photos are from our system, and I believe either me or one of my colleagues took these photos.
Okay, okay, fair enough. Okay, in your view, is this a typical, is this what these units look like? Is this a typical unit or is this, it looks relatively new? Is it,
Yeah, I'm not sure if this would be 100% representative of all the units as in the housing properties that I visited. There have been some units that are renovated, and then there are some units that have been, as Ms. Cates has indicated, where the units are just vacated and maybe they could require some work to get them rentable again. But I kind of doubt that this would be representative of every unit, but I'm not sure about, I guess, what percentage of the units would look like the pictures that are in my brief.
would you say that this is a newly, excuse me, a newly renovated unit?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so that they would be super new. I believe that I would say within the last 10 years, I would say, because just based off of how the washroom looks. But I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, obviously nobody's living there, so.
No.
It's, it's empty. I just wondered about the condition. And if this was a typical condition. Okay, I have no additional questions then. Ms. Cates.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $9,171,000. On page 4 for the scope of work, a member of our office, Marcelo Navarro, visited the property in December 2023 with a member of the assessment department, and they did an interior and exterior inspection. So the photos I provided are not my photos, but they're from him, and as well as some conversations with him about the overall state of the property. Page 6. We have the maps, so you could see the size of the site as well as the location. And then page 7, I have some exterior photographs of the buildings and the from different angles. Page 9 is our property description. So the subject property is on Carriage Road to the west of Sturgeon, and it's between the intersections with Silver Avenue and Ness in the Heritage Park area of Winnipeg. The property consists of 15 two-story buildings, site size of about 5 acres, and there are 75 units, which include 50 3-bedroom units and 25 4-bedroom, and there are 75 outdoor parking stalls noted. On page 14, we have the overview of our income approach. Cap rate information to follow on page 15. On page 19, we have the cap rate approach for the subject property. So we're starting with a base cap rate of 5.5%, applying a 0.5% premium to account for the size of the property and the fact that it is social housing. The condition overall, I would say, is probably somewhere on the range of average or average to above average. The property did get investment in terms of modifying the units to fix them up. So that's why I haven't applied as much of a premium to the cap rate, to acknowledge that there has been work put into these units, but still putting a premium because of the type of property and the type of wear and tear that it would sustain over the long term. So even if there's been investments into the property in the last 10 years, we see from some of the other photos that these units do take quite a bit of wear and tear. And from properties that I've gone to myself, we see the same thing where units can be renovated and then a few months or, you know, sometime later, then they kind of end up in that condition where they need to be fixed up again. So our value of $9,171,000 would be a value of $122,000 per suite. On page 21, we have our valuation breakdown. So the total net operating income would be $550,235, and the breakdown would be class code 10 would be a net operating income of $29,345 with a cap rate of 6%, and class code 20 with an NOI of $520,889 with a cap rate of 6%. So following, I have the appendix starting on page 23. We have the interior photos that I had available, as well as a current exterior from the site visit. And that would conclude my presentation on the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Wong, do you have questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan, do you have questions for Ms. Cates?
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Merritt, Mr. Merritt.
I have none, thank you.
Thank you, and I have no questions, so Ms. Cates, you have rebuttal.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so to summarize the rebuttal, we have taken a look at the city's cap rates. We have recalculated based on the income that the purchaser could expect at the time of purchase. All of the background documentation has been provided, so we've been quite transparent in terms of what we're rebutting, and it's all there for your review. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Wong, questions on the rebuttal?
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
None, thank you.
Thank you, and I have no questions. Mr. Wong, you have rebuttal evidence?
Yes. So on the bottom of my page 1, it just shows that sales 1 to 3 only use 1 year of income and expenses, which is insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income. And sale number 4 doesn't use any actual income and expenses to calculate the net operating income and their cap rate. And sale 5, the potential gross income utilized by Altus is not based on any historical reported information, so we feel it's incorrectly stabilized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, question on the assessor's rebuttal?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Werhan?
No, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions on the rebuttal. Mr. Wong, do you desire summation?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates.
I'll just do a brief summation. So this property is social housing, similar to most of the properties that we've dealt with. We believe that it should be valued in a different way than simply the lower end of the rent of market housing, as kind of the assessment department has described of their approach. We believe that a lower end rent is necessary to account for the lower end finishes, the utility grade finishes, expenses either at market or the higher end of the market, and then adjusting all the risk factors in the cap rate, risk factors being low quality construction, low income tenancy, etc. And we feel all the values are kind of consistent with each other in terms of what we've advocated for today. And we've been quite transparent in our cap rate study and all of our calculations used. So I would just ask the board to put more weight on that evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cates. Okay, that concludes item number 8 on our agenda. So we have heard all the items scheduled and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much, Mr. Wong, for your presentations today. And thank you, Ms. Cates, for your presentations today.
No, thank you. Have a
Thank
good day,
you.
everyone.
You too.
You too.
You too.